Good evening and welcome to the March 6, 2024 Comprehensive Plan Committee meeting. I would mention that we do have a quorum for tonight's meeting. And first order of business would be to approve the minutes of February 7th. Hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to see those minutes. And I would ask for a motion to approve if there are no adjustments to those minutes.
I'll make that motion, but I do have a very minor adjustment in the last of item C, March future land use or start planning. And it goes that Mr. Rand spoke about there being 3 Raymond for village areas. And I thought we ought to just strike out 4. I didn't want to give any impression that there were 3 Raymonds or 1 Raymond.
3 gentlemen named Raymond.
There might be, that could be interpreted, but that I think what I was trying to communicate at that part of the meeting was that there were an opportunity for 3 Raymond village areas, given the location of downtown and perhaps at Raymond Cape, junction of Raymond Cape, and this part of East Raymond right here.
Says that the recording secretary's got that. Thank you. So if there are no more amendments, we would approve the minutes based on that amendment.
I'll second.
It's seconded. All in favor? And they are approved. Thank you. Okay, this would be interesting. So do we have a representative from North Star on Zoom?
No, we don't have anybody except Sandy and I on Zoom right now.
All righty.
So I can't see that end of the table. North Star's not there?
Unless my eyes are failing me, I do not see
Oh,
anyone. So that being said, and whereas the bulk of this meeting is really based on Kate's future land use workshop, logistics, advertising and outreach and scenarios, motion to adjourn. No, we won't do that.
Would you like me to try calling them and see if I can get anyone?
Well, I would appreciate that. Although I think that the committee is well set up to be able to hold a meeting. But yeah, I would appreciate that if that could happen. As far as what I'm going to do is I'll move next to just to see if there's any public comment. And seeing none, we'll close public comment. We're flying through this agenda. Okay. As far as review of the revised vision statement, hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to see the revision. And I'd open it up for discussion and hopefully a vote so that we can approve or amend and approve this vision statement tonight. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Well, I guess I'll ask a question.
Yes, sir.
In the second paragraph, the very last statement says, integrating climate resilience in all town initiatives. I kind of want to, what does that really mean? Does that mean if the town is going to build a building, we have a bomb shelter or something? Or is it apply to any ordinances the town creates? Or?
And that's a great question, Greg. I'd turn to either John or John.
I know North Star is not here, but I think this might have been a North Star edition. I guess I would offer up a change that would just say integrating climate resilience within town or something of the like, and get rid of the absolute of the word all.
That would help.
Yeah, I mean, I think the intent is that, we're dealing with a lot of adverse weather, generally. And I think that when we look at our infrastructure and, the resilience and redundancies that we need to function as a town, roads being a big part of that. I think that's the intent here. I realize that the word "in all" is, I mean, I don't know that we necessarily need it in every aspect of everything, so I would like to leave that more open to interpretation.
You know, not to get on another subject, but this solar panel thing that's going in next to kind of Thomas Pond area.
That's a good example, yeah.
You know, I think we've discussed this before, but to chop down trees to build solar panels doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And I don't, you know, when we talk about climate change and that kind of thing, when people see solar panels, they get excited, but not realize the root cause of getting rid of the trees is where we're part of the problem, part of the reason why we're in the situation we're in now, which is clearing. So I just want to be really like, I don't know, I don't want the keywords and stuff to get ahead of us with some of this climate change stuff, but I understand about, hey, it's windy, it's been windy this past couple, you know, years, and the rain has not let up, and I understand the climate's changing, but I also want to make sure we're not doing anything that kind of is counterproductive to our mission statement.
Integrating climate resilience in strike all.
I was going to say,
Strike, like
just
John said.
integrating
Climate in.
climate. We can
in-
strike the rest of it. That seems fair enough.
I don't think, I mean, it's probably not within this committee's, you know, jurisdiction to figure out like what's appropriate,
Right.
you know, for every instance, so I would try to stay away from that. I would say that, you know, what we're seeing is generally, you know, I think the weather is very applicable in this situation, you know, like, we may need more initiatives regarding that, and I think it's a broad topic, and so I think we should have broad language, I guess, is.
Could be in town initiatives where, when applicable. Or when appropriate.
I think integrating climate resilience is rather vague, and I think that all that needs to be said, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't pinpoint it, it doesn't say in all, it doesn't say in some, it doesn't say in 25%, or it just says we're going to integrate it.
Just strike all. Yeah.
Well, I
That's
would have
my-
to agree with that from
my 2
from
cents.
the perspective that, you know, Greg, I appreciate your
Yep.
comments on that. This is a vision statement. My understanding, it's a broad statement. Therefore, putting fine points on things is probably not exactly what we want to incorporate into this statement.
Yep.
I think if it's in the vision statement that we are cognizant of and are encouraging, there be resiliency that involving climate change and in general, but I mean, you know, we could be more specific. We want resilient homes too, right? We want a number of things that are resilient, but at least getting that thought in there as far as the climate that we want, you know, integrating a climate resiliency, period.
Or we could just do an integrating, like appropriate climate resiliencies or something like that, and then a period. Or, sorry, integrating appropriate climate resilience initiatives. Get rid of town, get rid of all, add appropriate.
I think that maybe Kate's now here, she may well be able to help us on that, but I think part of that is that there's certainly state funds now still flowing, and maybe one of the last opportunities to get on some of those grant funds is coming up here in March. But those are largely targeted at, you know, at funding for public works or something, do culverts, do stormwater management, do ditching, help with construction projects that primarily deal with stormwater and road and keeping roads serviceable. But I think we've kicked around some good options. It seems like integrating climate resilience in town initiatives, you know, when appropriate, or something to that effect. Would that meet your guys' needs?
Did you use the term appropriate?
Yes.
Yes.
Everyone's looking at me.
Well, Greg, you raised it, so I guess
did,
what
yeah.
John was asking is, does that type of wording satisfy your concern
Yeah,
about?
yeah, I think that's helpful. The other thought I had was consider integrating climate resilience when appropriate in all town or in
In-town initiative.
town initiatives.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
That's good too.
I think appropriate's good. I think to get to the point where you would actually integrate anything, you'd have to consider it first. So I would just vote for appropriate. But I think remove the all and the town initiatives, and then we add an appropriate, and
That's fine, do that.
Okay, what I'm gonna do is, because we wanna move this along and hopefully just vote on accepting it, that's my goal anyway, is that, does someone wanna just read that sentence one time, and we can then make a motion to vote on that?
Raymond will meet future challenges with improved sidewalks and roads, community spaces, town services and facilities, schools, broadband internet access, and integrating climate resilience initiatives when appropriate.
All right, we've all heard that. I'd entertain a motion to incorporate that into the vision statement.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. All right. So that's done. That's pretty painless. Any other thoughts or comments on the proposed vision statement?
So we were thinking we can do another round of this where we print it out and have it at the next workshop. Do people want to do that again to get comments again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
I don't
would be a
see
good
why
idea.
not.
And
Yeah.
If we don't have to have this out in print tomorrow, then
We definitely don't, so.
Go with that, or were you looking to make it happen?
Well, I had hoped to get this done, since if I looked at the timeline, we're a couple of months at least behind in getting this done. But if the committee feels that we should get some more input from the community, I certainly can't oppose that, so.
I would say, Peter, I think we have a draft done, so we're on track in terms of that, but I think it's pretty common in these projects that the vision gets kind of fluffed as you progress towards the finish line. You know, people will sort of continue to make some small changes here and there, so.
Sure. So I don't know that we need a formal vote on this. We're not going to vote, it sounds like, tonight on approving this. So through unanimous consent, we will carry this over as a draft to the 19th to see if we can acquire any more feedback from the community. And then hopefully in April, we will vote on approving this. If that's, I'm not seeing any objections to that. And understanding that the change we just made would be incorporated in the draft for the 19th.
I've got that.
Okay. And I have only one comment, which is unusual, but I only have one comment, which is that just in deference to Charlie Levitt and Brad McCurtain, who I believe are the primary authors of the 2004 vision statement, there was some discussion early on about that was too long. I know we also discussed content, but as far as too long. So I just wanted to, in deference to them, to say that the initial 2004 vision statement was 424 words. The first draft from this committee was 318 words, and the current draft, minus the changes that we just made, is 218 words. So the current draft we have versus the 2004 vision statement is a third less words. And for myself, I don't find that to be an onerously big change in the verbiage. So just as a shout out to those two individuals that put a lot of time into the 2004 comprehensive plan, I think that overall they were pretty brief as well. I just want to make that comment. All right. So I believe that completes our old business. And new business would be, I'll turn it over to North Star and Kate. As far as new business A is land use, future land use workshop logistics. Kate.
Yeah, so I think we're going to spend some time here talking about our upcoming workshop, which is in now slightly less than 2 weeks. So I joined the Zoom so I can share my screen and put some things up. So let me just make that happen. Oh, Sue, can you allow me to share my screen? There we go. Thank you,
You should
Sue.
be all set now.
So I'll just make this bigger. So basically this workshop is going to be different from the last one. This will be a bit more formal. We've got booked 6 to 8 p.m. at the Public Safety Building. I will follow up with Sue, I think, because I have not been inside that building, so I'm not totally sure what it looks like. But we are going to start with a presentation, and this will probably take about half an hour. We were thinking 20 to 30 minutes, and then there's usually a good bit of Q&A when we start talking about land use. So we wanted to make sure we reserved up to 45 minutes to give a talk, answer questions, make sure everyone feels comfortable with what we're about to do. And then we will let everyone go around and do activities around the room. This will be kind of open house style. There will be 3 scenarios of maps that you will all get to preview tonight that people will be able to react to, put post-it notes on, put their own thoughts on. And then there will also be a station where we'll have some blank maps of Raymond for people to kind of make their own scenario if they have other ideas from what we're presenting. And we'll also have the draft vision statement there for people to react to. So we will have, people will have at least an hour to kind of go around and do those activities. They can do them real quick and leave, or they can hang around for a while. And then we'll have some time at the end. If enough people hang around, we can kind of do a report back at the end. So we saved some time for that. So that's the basic setup for the workshop. I think we're hoping that, some committee members will be able to come and, kind of like last time, sort of circulate and help answer questions. Maybe if we have these sort of 4 stations, maybe kind of try and have either one of us or one of you kind of near each of those stations in case people have questions. And yeah, this should be a little easier of a lift than the longer workshop we did, but I think it would be great if we can get that Costco card or something and get some like snacks and, waters or iced tea or something to have at the workshop. So I'm not sure if there's someone who would be able to help with that. But yeah, that's the overview. Does anyone have any questions or concerns?
No, I think I'd be available for March 19th. I looked over the budget finance and selectmen stuff, and there's nothing on March 19th, so that Tuesday should be available to help out. And then we were asking for somebody to help. You meant not just for that, but also pick up supplies?
Yeah, I think last time there was discussion that the town has a Costco card and someone could get snacks, or someone could go to Hannaford or something and with the town's card. So if anybody is available to help with that, I'm sure that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I'll talk with Joe Crocker tomorrow about that.
Okay, thanks. Sue.
I just need to know how much you just pick out of the air for numbers and whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to project sometimes. In some some ways of promoting this, you're able to get some like RSVPs, but we haven't envisioned anything exactly like that. I think my guess would be to kind of plan on about the same number of people who attended the other event. I will say that some mitigating factors that might lead towards some lower participation numbers are it's at night instead of during the day, and there's not a built-in audience of residents going back and forth throughout the course of the day. So I wouldn't, buy more bags of chips or iced tea or anything for more than that. And that was approaching 40.
I was going to say
30.
like 30 to 40 people is what we usually plan for, because not everyone's going to have a snack too. It's really just to lure people in.
So far, we have 23 people interested on Facebook.
Oh, that's great.
The occupant load of that meeting room is like 50.
Yeah.
So it'll be under 50.
Yep.
So 40 sounds like a good number to me.
Okay.
Kayla,
Sue,
was
does
that
that?
a lot of committee members saying that they would go, or is that independent of committee members? Just curious.
Well, one committee member is going, Jackie. Thank you for your RSVP. And the rest of are not committee members.
Awesome.
That's great.
Oh, I plan on going.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
We have one select board member that has been marked as going
I think Derek was going to go.
so far.
I'll step out. There's more than 50 people.
There's another room for overflow, but it's just not open.
And so I guess what I just bring up is having attended the recent Budget Finance Committee meeting combined with the Select Board meeting. I went there as a citizen, not as a representative of the Comprehensive Plan. However, I was also, since we are included in the TIF, as far as our budgeting was concerned, I was required to be there to explain our financial situation. There was some concern about our $1,000 overage as it is projected now to FYI 24-25. And there was a suggestion, I believe, from one select board member that we add $1,000 to the budget in order to compensate for that. But that once again, they budget finance, and correct me, we've got two individuals here on this committee that are on budget finance. So they likewise were in attendance at the 2-day sessions. So I just say, since we just gotten through kind of finalizing our requests for FY 24-25 for budgeting for this committee, and since there was a certain amount of discussion about snacks, do we, just to be clear, do we want to provide snacks? Because this would be unbudgeted. And if we do want to provide snacks similar to what we decided for the first workshop, do we want to set a ceiling on what we would spend? And I would open that up to the committee.
I think ceilings are excellent things to have. So I think we should, we voted last time what we were willing to spend on feeding people, so I think we should do the same tonight.
Oh, sure. I don't see us going over $100, to be honest.
And wasn't popcorn quite popular last time?
It was.
And Joe provided that for free last time. I don't know if that'll be the case this time. I know that he might
But
be
$10 of popcorn
he-
popcorn kernels can fill a room.
That is true. I know that he may be using popcorn this Friday,
Mhm.
possibly. So I don't know what he has left in his stores.
I'll ask about that though.
Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, it wouldn't be coffee like last time. I mean, at that time of the night or day, I should say, probably aren't going to be a lot of people tanking up on caffeine, but some sort of beverage.
Maybe bottles of water because they're not very expensive, but
Okay.
Yeah, you can get like 24 cases of water for under $5 probably. So
yeah.
it would not cost a lot.
Do we make a motion on the price for $100? I think that's.
If I were you, I would.
Can I make a motion of no more than $100? Second.
We've got a motion not to spend more than $100 on the upcoming future land use or workshop. We've got a motion and a second. All in favor? Done. All right.
So I think the other sort of related item we wanted to talk about was just advertising and outreach to help get people to this meeting. I've been sending emails to our email list, which is now almost 300 people, I think, so that's pretty good.
Great.
I know Kayla's been posting on Facebook. I just wanted to check in to see if we were able to get anything in the Road Runner, or if anyone else has put anything out in like any of the other newsletters or. Frank.
Got something, I'll get it to the Eagle.
Okay. I'll follow up with you.
And Sue, I did notice that on the reader board, it is also being advertised as we speak,
Yes.
and that's terrific. And could we arrange maybe for the day of, similar to the last workshop, that kind of run solo?
Yes.
Okay, because I think that was effective as well.
But yeah, if anyone else can reach out to any of the like parent or rec or any of the other newsletters, rattle all the trees we can't. I mixed up that metaphor, but you know. Anyone, I think I sent around a flyer and a social media ad, so if anybody wants to put anything up around town, that would be great.
I will be chilling with my PTO friends this Friday night, so I'll
You have a really fun event to tell them to go to.
Yep.
So I expect you're running it on the sign, right?
Yes, that's what Peter was referring to, that he'd seen it.
One thought on the sign, and it may be my failing eyesight, but just having the font or the letters bold and not blend into a colored black background. And it may well have been that may well have been addressed on the last one, but and sometimes when going by the sign, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of background on the sign, and having just a simple background with bold letters would help the speeding
Yeah,
commuter.
I haven't seen what Melissa put up, so I'll review it tomorrow.
Great.
Thanks, Sue.
If I can get a couple flyers too for the March 12th joint meeting between the Budget Finance and Select Board. That would be the Tuesday prior to that. I'd like to hand them out.
Okay, yeah, I'll send an email around to everyone with the information, the flyers, the social media ad again. So if any of you have anywhere you can distribute those, yeah, that would be a big help. But is there anything else you all feel like you need from us to help get the word out about this? No?
I think we've kind of exhausted the outreach at this stage of the game. My own sense is that if the citizens that are going to become engaged in this process are probably engaged in this process. Certainly, there's always the hopes that we're going to strike them out of the load, and someone in town that hasn't heard anything about what we're doing all of a sudden has an aha moment and is gathering all of their friends and acquaintances in the town to attend this meeting. But my sense is we've pretty much done the outreach. And once again, if I understand it, the state doesn't require that we're successful at outreach in this plan as long as we've made what they consider to be an appropriate attempt to reach out to the community. And so that's the charge of this committee.
I did plan to flood Facebook soon. I mean, I put the event up there, I posted a thing, but I was going to flood it closer, like
Yep.
get progressively more in people's faces as we got on. I didn't want to put too much out there before the event because people forget.
Totally. Yeah, I'll be sending more emails as we get closer to. And since this is on a Tuesday night, there are people who just can't do that. So we're going to have something available online afterwards with the presentation. We were thinking about recording audio over the PowerPoint so people can kind of get caught up on it that way. and having a version of the workshop everyone will be doing available
Do
online
you
too.
have your 3 scenarios already that you could share?
We do. That's
So
what's
that's
coming
another
up.
thing that I can put on Facebook as well.
Oh yeah.
Or is that?
Do you think that would be too confusing? What do you think?
Why don't we talk about the scenarios and then we'll see. I think one of the things that I was gonna emphasize in the next part of the conversation is these scenarios are meant to be realistic, plausible future conditions for how development can occur in Raymond. But you may have heard me say that they're just a projection, right? They can be useful ways to think about this, but they're not going to be how Raymond develops. It'll be some combination of the 3. And there will be things that you love about certain scenarios and things that you think are horrible ideas. And that's by design. Like you should have things you like and things you hate on each of these scenarios we'll talk about. But keeping in mind that they're, realistic, plausible scenarios that focus on different parts of the vision statement and the values that have come up through the process so far, they will emphasize certain values over others. And that's going to be, trade-offs. So I think that in a summary, these scenarios are about the trade-offs between important things that people in Raymond value. And where do you emphasize certain values over others, and to what extent, I think is an important part of what we're going to try and get out of the future land use workshop.
I appreciate that, Ben. And I mentioned at the combined budget, finance, and select board meetings two nights in a row, but I did manage to mention to them that my understanding is that there's really 2 types of goals. There's aspirational goals, and then there's realistic goals, and that it's always good to have aspirational goals. But in working with planning, it's in my opinion, it's much better to have realistic goals.
Yeah, so to that point, and I do want to dig into this in a little bit. I don't want to jump the gun too much on the agenda, but getting back to Kayla's original question, I think it's worth thinking a little bit more about if we share the scenarios or individual scenarios, and not to give people the impression that this is what the committee's recommending, or of the 3 scenarios, this is the best one or anything like that. I don't want to give people any of those kinds of potential false impressions, but if looking at those maps together, if they look at all 3 maps as a thing that might pique their interest, and then come learn more about the differences, that could be worth it if we have enough disclaimer in there that says these are what we're going to be looking at as we think about the future.
Maybe what I'll do instead is say, what is a future land use map? Here's Gray's most recent one, for example.
So we do have some good mapping. I don't
Yeah,
know
we can
if we
share.
want to jump right into that part of the program or not.
I was
If
gonna say,
a little more
we have some
logistics.
previews available tonight, or is that?
Yeah, that's-
We're
so-
discussing
On the
that.
agenda next.
Yeah, I think so. Does everyone feel comfortable with the logistics for the workshop outreach? We will, just like last time, we'll send you all a guide around beforehand that explains what the stations are. And I think we were gonna say if any of you want to kind of see how it's all set up beforehand, we'll probably be there about an hour. I haven't talked to Sue about this yet, but we'll probably be there about an hour early. So if the committee members, if anyone wanted to kind of get a preview, you could come 15 minutes early.
And you'll send a sign-up sheet for us to make sure that we're coming to attendance.
This is only to 2 hours, so I don't think we need to do a rotating sign up. I think as long as a few of you come, we'll be fine. And last time you all showed up, so.
We all showed up in staggering amounts, and I didn't even think of this. Did we didn't break any meeting? No, because it's
No.
advertised, right? So it's
Yeah.
all good if we're all there. Okay, yeah.
I would just state, as far as outreach and the like goes, that one of the advantages of this committee, from my perspective, is that it's multi-generational. I don't think I've ever been on Facebook in my life, so I appreciate Kayla's efforts and the efforts of others that are internet savvy in reaching out that way,
Yeah.
because I wouldn't have a clue. So thank you.
Sue, I'll make sure I coordinate with food stuff with you and Joe.
Yes, that'll be great.
Okay, so if there's no more on the advertising or outreach, we could launch into these scenarios.
Yeah, so I will share my screen again. Let's see. I'll see if I have to flip back and forth to show those images. So this is sort of we're going to give you kind of a preview of what would be in the presentation at this meeting, and that we'll go through the scenarios at the end. So the first thing we have in here, we found these maps in the previous comp plan. Now I know these are really hard to read, but these are from the previous comp plan, and they show sort of the points are all buildings in Raymond over time. So this one over here, why does this keep going like, sorry guys.
A little delayed.
All right. Okay.
Patient.
Thanks. So this one over here is 1892. And like I said, I know these are a little confusing to look at, but you can see that like the only buildings are really in the village over here, a little bit by Raymond Cape, a little bit by Webb's Mills, and along the main roads. And then here in 1941, by now we're starting to see the lakefront kind of start to fill in on a bunch of these lakes and ponds, and more development along those main roads and in those sort of main village nodes here at Raymond Cape, at Webb's Mills. Then here by 1975, we're seeing a whole lot more red dots. This is where Raymond was really growing pretty quickly, and you start to see dots not just along the lakes and along the roads, but also kind of moving off the roads into these like more open areas. We're starting to see more dots. And then when we go, this one from 2001, again, not super easy to read, but we see even more dots sort of in the open areas off the roads. The lakefronts are pretty well filled out. And then this map is one I put together from our most recent land use data. And so this, again, these are a little hard to compare because I don't know what data they used in 2001 and they look a little different. But you can see like where, from those previous maps, we don't really see those villages just sticking out anymore. There's really just kind of dots everywhere over here, totally in this area, a lot more dots in the open spaces around here. So this is just kind of to give you some context for how Raymond has developed over time. And you can sort of think about the dots when we talk about, how many new buildings were projected to have demand for in Raymond over the next 20 years. Every single one of those buildings is another dot. So you can kind of think about where you might put more dots on this map. So we pulled out some vision statement themes, and the committee, you can give us some feedback here if you think these are the themes we should kind of stick to, but these are some of the big ideas from the vision statement. Protecting natural resources, maintaining quiet rural living, some transportation improvements, both in terms of traffic congestion and in terms of sidewalks, bike lanes, trails, helping local businesses thrive, also strengthening the sense of community in town, maybe through more community spaces, improving town facilities and services, and integrating resilience where appropriate. This is just sort of another thing to have in your head as we think about this. So now we get into future land use. So from 2015 to 2022, there were 256 building permits for residential construction. The majority of those were for single-family homes on lakefronts. There were 2 building permits for commercial construction, so not very much, and there was very little growth on Main Street or Route 302. So what the purpose of this future land use work is to think about how we can kind of meet those big ideas in the vision statement while accommodating the fact that Raymond is likely to need about 200 new year-round housing units in the next 20 years. There's going to be demand for at least 100 new seasonal, probably lakefront housing units, and probably more demand for that if there was room. So every single one of those housing units is another little red dot, right? So thinking about where those dots should go on the map. So does everyone kind of see where we're going so far? Okay.
Yeah, so it's really the focus of this workshop coming up in a couple weeks is to balance the elements of the vision statement with where those dots are going to go. So that's what we used as the baseline for the scenario development. And again, I don't know if the next slide talks a little bit more about this. What we've got is, the state requires us to look at rural areas that we want to protect from development, that are going to receive the maximum protections from the impacts of development, through growth areas that are meant to be places that are encouraged or incentivizing additional development. The parts of the community that are appropriate for more activity, more energy, more business, more people. And making distinctions between those two, because that will have impacts on town investments, town zoning decisions in the future, what kind of uses are appropriate, and so forth. So to set the foundation for those next discussions, we're looking at a future land use map that will ultimately be saying where are the quiet, natural, peaceful, lower activity areas, and where are the more developed, commerce-focused, residential-focused areas in the town. So this continuum is meant to kind of give people a picture that it's not all going to be one or the other, right? I've laid out a pretty black and white distinction between rural and growth, but in reality, there will be some new housing in the rural area, and there will be open spaces and parks in the growth areas. It's a continuum, but looking at it from rural and growth, I think is a good way to explain to folks who are going to be coming to this potentially for the first time and being asked to participate in some of these scenario activities.
So I think we have, so we're going to present 3 future land use scenarios. One is a conservation focus, one is a villages focus, and one is a transportation corridors focus. And like we've said this a couple times already, I think, but just emphasizing, like, you're not picking one of the 3. They all probably go too far in one direction or another. The idea is to see what you like, what you don't like, what we might be able to take from different ones.
Yes.
So,
and I think when we get into the presentation, we'll need to emphasize that again. It's just like, we're not voting, we're not choosing the best scenario. We want you to like things and hate things maybe on each of these. So we'll see. I'm super interested to get your feedback this evening of if everyone's like, yeah, scenario 2 is the best, then we'll have to go do some more work to make it not clearly the best.
Okay, so I think I can bring up some bigger, we were discussing the shape of Raymond makes it difficult to show on a horizontal slide. So I have some full screen images I can bring up, and at the workshop we'll of course have these printed out very large with the description next to them. But so this first one is conservation focused, and the idea here, so the red here is your growth area down by 302. So the idea of this scenario is that all the new growth, we're going to concentrate it primarily in this existing area of development. And then the focus here is to prioritize conserving open space and natural resources as much as possible. So all this green up here, we would call critical rural. So the highest protection from the impacts of development, as well as these buffers around the bodies of water are also critical rural. So we're really prioritizing protecting water quality and natural resources here. And then this light green here would just be regular rural, I guess. So kind of status quo rural development, kind of the 3-acre lot size that you have around a lot of town now.
Dark green is shoreline zone and conserved land.
So this would all of the darker green. So the very dark green is actually currently conserved land. All this green would be critical rural. So this would have the highest level of protection. Basically all of the northern part of town and around all of the bodies of water. And then I think, yeah, you can talk about this. But so for each scenario, we're gonna basically talk about, with this scenario, what are the impacts on all these different things in town?
So the idea of this conservation-focused scenario is that we're trying to minimize the impacts of development on lakes and ponds, protect unfragmented habitats and undeveloped areas, and really beef up and maybe expand shoreline zoning protections. The critical rural parts of town are really going to be the focus of keeping them the same as much as possible. There's a lot of people who live in those parts of town, but we're going to do our best in this scenario to make sure that future development is going to be minimal and low impact. So that, again, the opposite of that is the new development, those additional 150, 200 homes are by and large going to be encouraged and incentivized in that the busy area of 302 today and around Raymond Village. So what that means for transportation impacts is new trails interconnecting across town and connecting to trail systems in other communities. It means no new public roads in any of those dark green areas. These are going to be places that we do not want to encourage municipal investment, and to that end, these are the places we're going to focus town dollars and town effort in working to make that area the focus of conservation. So working with the land trust, working with the state and other Maine Farmland Trust, other partners to preserve as much of in that green as we can. There will be minimal investments in pipes and hard infrastructure. The second bullet point's more about proactive investment in open space as infrastructure. It will also require some community coordination and investment in safe septic systems and groundwater disposal. It could be small-scale community septic systems or requiring advanced wastewater treatment in the growth area to make sure that it is possible to get the amount of focused growth there that this scenario envisions. And as far as economy and new jobs, there will be more opportunities into the future for outdoor economy and lake economy under these scenarios. It's also envisioning a lot of remote workers and frankly a lot of people who still end up traveling to 302 destinations in Wyndham and beyond for their daily needs and work.
Is there a sense for like area-wise, like how much of, like what percentage of the town that covers, or acreage over?
I didn't calculate it, but
I mean, like visually it's, kind of the top third, but there's so much water on the lower part of the map that it almost looks like there's probably more land in that conservation area than out of it.
probably.
It's approaching 50% of a place we want to get more serious about protecting from the impacts of development. And the flip side of that coin is making sure that there's kind of setting the stage and some kind of investments within the Route 302 area. But this isn't, about extending public water, and it's not about creating a new sewer system. It's just more like, how do we enable smaller subdivisions and lot by lot development to kind of meet those housing goals that we're anticipating.
So you wouldn't take into consideration that the entire west shore of Panther Pond is in our TIF district, and that the potential for financing through TIF loans for let's say development, it's basically the Portland pipeline. That's our TIF district, and it does run right down through the 302 corridor, and it presents opportunities there as well. But I'm just thinking that West Shore would not be considered, the West Shore of Panther, as something where we would be looking for any type of industrial, commercial development that would access tax incremental funding, which is actually part of what we used to establish the water line, the Portland water line from the Wyndham line all the way down 302 and eventually to the public safety building, which is on 302, adjacent to Deep Cove. And so if I'm hearing you, Ben, this scenario wouldn't be looking to encourage the potential for extensions of water lines or the like.
Not beyond the red area shown.
Okay, thanks.
And all the boundaries in this too, these are just conceptual. So, we didn't draw this to a parcel map and say this would be exactly here. At this stage, these are kind of conceptual areas to kind of demonstrate, like, what if we concentrate all the growth right here and try and preserve everything else?
Sure.
Is kind of this one.
Yep.
Chris, how many acres or like kind of percentage-wise of vacant land is in Raymond? How much undeveloped
Oh, I think
vacant
I know
land?
that.
I have no clue.
Okay, it's a question I'm kind of alluding to, is the majority of it in that green and deep green?
That contains a lot of the largest
That-
vacant
that-
developable
yeah.
parcels.
Not necessarily, though.
That's a lot of the,
This-
what's that?
Oh, the green doesn't necessarily have these open areas like you talked. The Cape has quite a bit of.
The
open
Cape does too,
areas.
yep. So we
Throughout
didn't
the
put
whole
the Cape
town,
in it.
really.
So it wouldn't really necessarily
yeah.
say that's just strictly, not strictly in the green, but the majority of it. Would you still say the majority of that is still in that deep green areas?
I think that deep green on the biggest part of it is between Egypt, it's off of Egypt, where, is it Meadow?
Morgan Meadows.
Morgan Meadows.
Morgan Meadow.
And then the
Right.
other large one is the.
Inland Fisheries and Wildlife.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 acres.
Hayden Murdo.
Okay.
One of the things I was gonna say, you said we could love it or hate it, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the red. I think that's the growth area that has been our growth area in previous ordinances and from the last comprehensive plan. The thing I don't like is the Cape. That, we have, the whole Cape is in shoreline zone. It's not 250, it's not 600, it's the entire Cape. And the reason the last committee protected that area is a lot of it is wetland, and wetlands of special significance because they are associated with a great pond, Sebago Lake. So that area, you might want to have more green down there as conservation and protection. Right now, it's already set up so that anybody that does a septic system in that area has to do 120 gallons a day per bedroom rather than 90. So that is something, well, you brought it up, that it's an area where we want to protect. So that's good. The areas around the lakes are also 600 feet. And to Peter's point, there is quite a bit of developable land from Thomas Pond, which is that little blue right above the cape, to Panther Pond, it's kind of a big, it's not, I wouldn't call it a mountain, but it's a good hill. So there's a lot of developable area on the Panther side that could be, like Tita said, developed for even industrial. There's some industrial up there already. You have the Portland Pipeline pumping station, and you know, we have the old Dielectric, which is now SPX,
Right.
up that way, Sinclair, where the tower is. And a lot of that's owned by Sinclair because they need the land to support that 1,500, whatever it is, foot tower. So that should be looked at a little bit more in detail. But you may want to leave it like this because you're going to hear a lot of comments, and that's what you want.
Yes. So it is very expected that people, like the kind of comments you've raised about TIF zones and, well, this is a good place to develop. Maybe we don't want to call it rural. Or
That's where the colored pencils come in.
that's what I want to hear more of that. But let's get through the next couple.
Sure, if I
And
can,
then we can do a little compare and
Yep,
contrast.
if I could just, as far as anyone that's been following the planning board meetings, and Craig is here, and I'm sure he can correct me if I'm wrong in this at all.
Yeah.
But the planning board is submitting to the select board for this next warrant, a relaxation in the shoreline zoning. So everything from talking about, and I know I couldn't go through a meeting without talking about LD 2003, but as far as ADUs in the shoreline, and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg.
Yeah,
but-
we are relaxing the rules.
yeah, they're going to be proposing to the town that we go from 600 feet to 250 feet. So that's going to be a significant change on the Cape if in fact that gets voted through. So just to keep everybody updated on what's happening on the planning board. Is that's correct, Craig?
Yes.
Thank you.
We're not changing the shoreline zone, I don't think. We're changing the distance requirements when it comes to building homes and setbacks and all that stuff.
You're not changing the uses or
No.
the description.
Not the words, just the map.
It's,
Right.
Right.
it's too,
You're changing from
Beyond
600 to
250, it's-
250
yeah.
and more in the Cape.
Yeah, so the setback, basically,
Setback.
for building.
Right.
And that would bring us, I believe, in line with the state model.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas we're 600 feet.
Correct.
It's a Raymond thing, yeah.
I brought it up for that very reason, Peter. I want people to be thinking about that because in my term here, which has been since 2006, we've really worked to protect the Cape from, not from development, but doing real conservative approach to development so that, you know, we protect the crown jewel of Raymond, Sebago Lake, and Panther, and, you know, that's why we're living here.
Well, absolutely,
So-
I don't disagree.
So I'm not saying one thing, or I'm not being pro or against.
Yeah.
I'm just raising that in the past, that's what we've done.
Sure. I believe that this was brought to the attention of the planning board by some residents of the Cape, and the fact that they're being prohibited from being able to reasonably place a structure, let's say like an accessory dwelling unit, because as Chris is very good to point out, at 600 feet setback from the water, you're on a peninsula. It means the entire peninsula is in lake frontage and lake shore. And as far as an individual's right to be able to develop their property, it gets a little constrained.
The issue originally started with somebody that wanted to do an ADU, and they
Correct.
couldn't because they didn't have double the land.
Correct.
And double the frontage.
Yeah.
So
And
that
young
brought
lady
it,
bent my ear for several hours after a meeting.
yeah.
All right, let's move on to something completely different.
horrors.
So villages focus. So this map basically was based on some of those historic patterns of growth in Raymond. I think at the last meeting I pulled up that 1870s map of Raymond to show you how there used to be several small villages and post offices in town. So what we've got here, we've got the 302 growth area in red. And then in orange, we have the Village and Webb's Mills. These are, so 302, you all know what 302 looks like. This is a larger scale, kind of bigger stores, bigger buildings, bigger commercial development. Then we have 2 villages in orange, which would be a smaller scale of development. Those would be maybe 2 or 3 story buildings, maybe a couple stores, some mixed use, you know, maybe some housing upstairs. And then these sort of purple ones out on Raymond Cape and North Raymond would be even smaller scale. I kind of call them, we've been calling them rural crossroads. So, you know, sometimes at like a main rural intersection, you have like, you know, a neighborhood store or something like that, a couple more buildings.
Place to grab a pizza or a jug of milk on the way home kind of thing. Kind of place kids might bike to get candy in the summer.
Kind of like a transitional area.
A small neighborhood scale kind of place. Different from the Village, where you might find more like a hardware store, a lawyer's office. You know, these would be, you know, very small, like just in the immediate vicinity of the intersection, maybe 2 or 3 buildings on each leg of the intersection.
So what we're showing here, there are some circles around each of these points, and the smaller circles show a half-mile walking radius, and then the larger circles show a 1.5 mile biking radius. So the idea here is that these villages or kind of tiny growth areas through town would allow for some neighborhood stores, neighborhood conveniences, community places that would be within walking or biking distance for a lot more residents of Raymond, and would kind of be, so we still have concentrated growth, but it would be spread to different sort of nodes in the town with these big green areas of conservation.
So I think Kate's done a good job of describing the growth, kind of going back to this historic model of you know, more distributed, smaller scale neighborhood growth areas, focused on maybe some infill, some revitalization of existing structures, shared parking, so that not every individual building or use is going to need to provide its own parking. Like there might be some public parking within each one of these that everybody would have access to make sure that the buildings are close enough together that people can easily get around. And again, there's still going to provide some opportunity for conservation of these blocks, but you can clearly see that there's smaller blocks of open space. It's not just one big block on the north end of town. It's connected to open space in surrounding communities. When it comes to transportation infrastructure, we're envisioning road and sidewalk improvements within each one of those village areas, within each of those growth areas. There should be sidewalks on both sides, safe places to bike. The speed limit would be safe and slow for people to kind of place you'd be okay having 10 or 12-year-old kids on a bike. There's also within these small nodes of activity and growth opportunity for van pools or senior transportation. I think that you could easily envision in this scenario smaller scale homes, mixed use development, 3 and 4 unit buildings, or maybe a 12 or 15 unit senior neighborhood. And those kinds of concentrations of residential activities would allow for on-demand or van pool transit. Again, you'd be looking at something similar to that we saw around community septic and advanced wastewater treatment in the villages. Here, it would be more distributed. So instead of having maybe one larger system that would be serving that 302 area, you might have something small like under a ball field or under a park that would be able to treat the wastewater for everybody within that quarter-mile radius. And again, we're envisioning kind of a focus on the economy that would allow for some of these neighborhood services and businesses in the village where people can do more of their daily needs. Back in the old day, it was probably a big deal to go from, North Raymond into Gray or North Raymond into North Wyndham. And we think people are much more mobile than that. However, within these village areas, you could find accountants or barbers or places you could, reasonably walk to, even if it's just for one or two things. I said convenience shopping, some convenience food, those kinds of things that you don't see a lot of in those places today because there's not enough people. So more people in those areas will provide some of those business opportunities with a focus on local jobs, workforce housing, smaller scale, new growth, as opposed to that larger format Route 302 model in the last scenario. Any quick questions about this one? We will have those maps in a bigger format. We can zoom up and down and zoom in and out.
I can pull those up when we're done too.
Yeah, so I think like if we want to talk about where the edges are or those kinds of things, there'll be a little time to do that as well. But
Ben, if I could ask you, in the orange area in this scenario, is that extended further up away from 302 along 85 and kind of extending the village?
yes.
Yes.
If you go back to, would you mind hopping back 2 slides to the first
Yeah.
conservation scenario? This one was more like 302 and Raymond Village, and it didn't go too far north. I think our intent was to try and keep it more kind of where it is, whereas this one envisions new neighborhood scale development in places where it doesn't occur today.
Sure.
There was a lot of talk at the last workshop too about potential road connections into Wyndham that would be envisioned in this village focus
Sure.
scenario.
And we recently have and it's just about complete a development up on the east side of Route 85. There's 26 units, I believe, and they actually extended the Portland Water District's line up. Once again, this wasn't done by the town. I believe it was done by the developer. So that development actually has extended the water line further up 85, which it would be in line with this scenario.
Yep.
Any other
Hill you're talking.
Honey Hill,
Yeah.
yes.
No, right.
any other questions on this one before we go to the last one?
Yeah, I think we can talk about them all
Yeah,
together
I can pull
at
up the
end.
bigger
Yeah.
maps too. I know these are hard to see. Like I said, your town
Yeah.
has a difficult shape.
No, yeah. So do you want to?
We're all hills and lakes.
You can do this.
That's what we are.
Side. I'll do the.
Stones.
So the last one we have here. So this is the corridors focus. This one is focused on Raymond's transportation corridors, your most traveled roads. So this has less concentrated growth. We did use some different colors here. The red is really your not traditional, your 302 growth. So the kind of bigger development, bigger stores that you're seeing on 302 here, and basically going all the way along 302. The orange is slightly smaller scale growth area. So, more smaller businesses, like maybe 3 or 4 unit buildings. So that's in the existing village, and then also all the way along kind of where we are now, Webb's Mills, up into where the road forks up here. And then this yellow stretch is what we're calling a transition zone. So this is an area, because this connects kind of our corridors here, this is an area that isn't quite a growth area, but it will see more growth than other parts of town.
Yep. So, as you just heard, this is about growth along the roads, and what we're envisioning in this scenario is larger standalone multifamily or senior family housing along with transit. So this is as opposed to the last scenario where you had maybe like more neighborhood kind of things. These are the kinds of things where you might have enough space to spread out to do some larger format projects. There are some very common examples of affordable housing, senior housing that are taking place in like 24 to 32 unit buildings that wouldn't fit in a neighborhood, but they might fit into Raymond in this kind of scenario where you have a little more space to handle water and wastewater. The status quo for the rural parts of town, the focus is really on those roads. And to that end, the town would be working with partners at DOT to really focus on road upgrades, to focus not only on how to get people from where we are now down to 302, but how do you get through town on Route 302? How do you deal with the lights? How do you deal with 302 congestion? We want to focus in this scenario on moving traffic safely and efficiently, balanced with multi-use pathways, sidewalks, bike lanes. I think 302 is really envisioned to be getting people through town in their cars and having, we talked about a multi-use trail next to it so you could separate people who are walking and biking from the vehicular traffic on 302 and integrating people who bike and walk into the roadway more thoughtfully and safely along 85 as you get out of the 302 area and come up to the schools where we are in this part of town. There will be very little need for sewer and water infrastructure in this scenario. Again, there could be some larger developments that won't be able to take advantage of kind of community scale systems. They'll have to figure it out on their own, but there would probably be opportunities for properties sized appropriately to do that. Water supply concerns may increase within these areas. Extending water is not part of this. Sometimes that happens as development goes, but in this scenario, the roadway and transportation infrastructure would be prioritized over water and sewer infrastructure. With those investments, making 302 more efficient, hopefully more attractive, and easier to access for people who bike and walk, we want to have Route 302 be growing with kind of those larger scale regional types of uses and see more of the local development happening in the village areas in Orange and along 85. There would absolutely be improvements for commuters in this scenario where 302 is getting such a large focus, but also being able to get from some of the northerly parts of town and from the Cape out to 302 and where you need to go from there. So the focus here is kind of doing what we're doing today better on 302, and from the standpoint of being able to move people into and out of Portland and up to Bridgeton more efficiently, with some really key investments in making bicycle and pedestrian safety a priority. We heard a lot about that at the last meeting. And we want to make sure in this scenario that we really flesh those multimodal kind of concerns out. This is also where I think you would see opportunities to go from van pools and on demand to more of a robust Lakes Region Explorer kind of model, where you would have more of that kind of larger scale, regular fixed route service.
So any questions about this one?
Those are great. They really span the spectrum of the options. It seems like you guys captured the full range really well, and now it'll be a matter of picking and choosing with the public.
Yeah, I mean, we would love to fine tune these a little bit more over the next couple weeks, and if you had some feedback that could help us do that.
I can bring up the bigger.
The
images.
idea here is that they need to be plausible. They have to be real enough that people aren't going to be like, that'll never happen, or that's ridiculous. Why would you even show that to us? They are all based on different elements of that vision statement. So the ones that are really conservation heavy have a lot of that, but they don't have some of the other things. And the ones that are bike and pedestrian and traffic focused have a lot of that, but maybe not a lot of some of the other things. So those are the trade-offs, because there is a limited amount of money and resources and time, frankly, for volunteers and staff to do things. And each one of these scenarios kind of puts all their eggs in one bucket. You know, they're not trying to, like, we're going to do a little of this and a little of that. We've tried to develop these in a way that they do a really good job at maybe a one-dimensional kind of approach. And I know that's not how it's really going to work out. But the exercise is to, like, identify the best aspects of each of these and try and minimize the negative aspects that could result from any one of these. And you ultimately will be putting a final future land use map together that borrows from the best of each one of these as it's reviewed by the community, and kind of minimizes the focus on the things that aren't valued or could detract from what Raymond should be in the future. So again, you know, there are going to be things you love, and I heard, like, that conservation, let's, you know, I think we took it to 11, like, let's take it to 12 and put all of the Cape in there too. And, you know, I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about some of these other ones as we compare them. They need to be different enough from each other, but they also have to be realistic. Like, my hope is you'll see in each of these, like, yeah, that could happen, you know, and there are things that we want to encourage and incentivize to happen, and there are these things that could happen if we better do something to keep that from happening. So that's the goal.
Great presentation, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's really good.
It was excellent.
Can you flip back to the number 2?
Yeah.
Or number 2?
And I can zoom in too. I know these are, I'm gonna print these out on 24 by 36 and you'll be able to look at them real big. So there's a lot in the little legend
maybe
here,
you want
but
to zoom right in.
yeah. So going kind of from top to bottom, we have our crossroads up here in North Raymond, which once upon a time had its own little post office.
And school.
Yeah. And then we based the middle village here really around the town. So up to the middle school kind of was what we did here, envisioning that the future of that is kind of up for question. So that could be where some investment takes place, some community facilities, or, you know, new things could happen. And then the village here. This is 302. This is where, you know, maybe you have that road connection into Wyndham. This can be sort of large, because this area can take a sort of larger scale of building than some of the other parts of town. You have that Portland water line. You're right next to Wyndham. And then this is where Raymond Cape, I think, used to also have its own post office, or at least a school, so.
The Hawthorne House is right there. And there's a sandwich shop there now, like you were talking about, Ben. Hasn't been hugely successful, but it's there.
So in line with scenario 2, what I would tell you is that, and Greg, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but along with the proposals for this year's warrant from the planning board, there is a proposal to allow residential in the commercial zone. and 2 families. So in line with what you're saying as far as expansions into the growth area, I would tell you that it's been a challenge to get some of these things in front of people in the town, given that, and I'll editorialize only for a minute, that, the town is kind of faced with a number of these questions, primarily because in my opinion, you shouldn't wait 2 decades to update your comprehensive plan, because things change, and things have been changing faster as time goes on. And so what we're doing now in this committee, I think admirably, is playing catch-up over something that should have happened at least 10 years ago. I would also say that with the introduction of residential in the commercial area, you're getting more toward that village concept. And the idea of marrying where the concentration of new building is going to go for residences, along with the services that we keep saying, well, what's the sense of looking at trying to develop affordable housing if in fact you don't have the services for them? I know we're not a metropolitan area, but we do have some services. And encouraging the growth in those areas has been the goal of the comprehensive plan committees since 1991. So what I'll say also is that the thought that incrementalism is the way to go and things don't change overnight. 1991, 2004, most of these proposals were the same. I guess it's the difference between proposing something and implementing it. And so, and what I would also say is my understanding is that along with the 10-year plan that we are going to develop for the town, the town's plan, there needs to be a schedule for review after the implementation committee is done. Because our implementation committee had 104 goals in 2004. They completed their work in 2010, 6 years. And in that time, less than half, although some notable changes came out of it, a lot of them on the environmental side, which is why we have the pristine environment we have today, and through the efforts of code enforcement and the planning board. And I'm not putting them down, but I'm just saying, after 2010, in less than half of the goals of the plan were implemented, and some of the higher priority ones weren't implemented at all. We find ourselves today doing a lot of catch-up. And so I know some of us have made efforts to get in front of boards that are involved with planning and boards that are involved with finance and where we're going. But I don't see us really making any progress other than putting out these goals, even though they be realistic, if in fact there isn't some process for follow-up and update to what we end up doing or submitting to the town in January of 2025. Yeah.
Greg, are those changes, are they saying you still have to have commercial on the bottom and residential on top, or are they just saying
No.
that residential could just go there?
Yeah. I think I got them here somewhere if you want me to read them.
Good man.
Got affordable housing. I got. Maybe I don't. I thought I brought it with me.
Well, Greg,
Yeah,
as
but-
you mentioned the term as far as affordable housing, it seems like that the planning board has struggled a lot with that definition as well. And we've got
Well,
several.
it isn't a real clear
Well,
thing to understand.
I think that it is hard to understand, primarily because we've got realtors here, so you correct me if I'm wrong.
I
But
find it confusing too.
But when you're talking about affordable housing, there's a concept in real estate about what's affordable, right? What does it cost? And so I've heard members of the planning board say, well, you know, or actually it was the town planner, contract planner, stating that it's, well, you know, it's an oxymoron, affordable housing in this day and age. Yeah, nobody can afford, with the building and the labor costs, to build a house. I think the point that's being missed is that if we're not looking at accessory dwelling units, if we're not looking at tiny homes, then there's no place for someone like me, who's an empty nester and has a house absolutely set up for a family of 4 or 5, right? To go in and move into one of these downsized places, if they existed. And then what happens is that releases the 3-bedroom family size building. And if I understand the very basics of economics, a lot of the cost of affordability of home have to do with supply and demand. So if what you do is create more of an inventory of homes by itself, it's kind of like, I don't know that we need to drill, but we do need to build. We just got to build in a smart way. So, but those are changes that are on the horizon this year, that if get voted in by the people, are going to have a significant impact on scenario number 2. Because as far as transition areas, what I just like to see personally is what you've done here, which is extend that orange zone up Route 85 from the village area. Because, Chris, you can tell me best about this. There isn't a whole lot of space right now in the village area for development, is it?
No, there isn't.
You're saying the Orange Village area there?
The one to the-
reddish.
So making this area a little bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's been in our
Yeah.
rounds of edits. This has changed size. We can make it a little bigger up into.
Well, you have enlarged the reddish color too, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It looks like it goes further north.
Yeah, so
If you go to the
to
first
answer one of your questions about affordable housing, you're not gonna build a 3-bedroom home or a 2-bedroom home that's affordable under 350, 400,000. That's just cost of building.
Correct.
But you can build a multi-unit if we allow them in the commercial district or other areas, maybe village residential, and build a 40-unit building that has a clustered septic system and has town water. Those are the kind of things that can make affordable housing.
Sure. My house where I'd have vacated now would in no way meet the criteria for what an affordable house is. It just wouldn't. The average couple that is starting up aren't going to be able to afford my house. I'm not saying none of them will, but a lot of them wouldn't be able to. And affordability, if I understand it, is targeted towards the state criteria, which is based on the area mean income. So it's not meant to build a 3 or a 4-bedroom 40 by 50 house. That's not affordable housing. That's almost not affordable housing ever, but it's certainly not affordable housing now. But the state has a very clear definition of what affordable housing is. John?
I've got something, hopefully this may just clear up some of the jargon. There's housing you can afford, which typically lay people would define as 30% of your salary, your take home, would go to pay your rent or your mortgage.
Yep.
And then there's
Including your utilities.
yes. And then there is affordable housing, which I really think should be lumped in with things that have your AMIs, right, which is dictated by the state, your area median income, but then is also there's a lot of subsidies attached with that, and there's also a rent cap attached with that. And so I think that those two things are two very distinct things. One, affordable housing, which is basically subsidized through state low-income housing tax credits, or LIHTC, as we like to call them, federal and or state, to build that. And the incentive to build that is to build, I think like that, and really that type of product and that type of housing only gets built when there's enough state subsidy and federal subsidy to build it. and there is currently a very large backlog. So we're not seeing a lot of that. But also you need the certain town and city, jurisdictions to build it in. And as Chris was kind of alluding to, you also need some scale. Most people are not going to build a 5-unit affordable housing project. There's not a lot of subsidy for that. Now, Maine is a lot more small developer friendly than a state like Massachusetts. They recently came out with a program called the Rural Affordable Program through Maine Housing. This is aimed at small developers. It's for developments from 5 to 18 units. This is the smallest affordable housing program that I know exists in New England. It's a very good program. It's already oversubscribed. There was a round in December. I think 15 or 16 projects throughout the state applied, and I think about 5 are going to get awarded. That's statewide. If you multiply 5 by 18, it's not that many units. And what happens when you have kind of market rate development, so like a triplex or a quadplex, which would be, 4 or even like a 12-unit building, and towns impose certain affordability requirements on those, it makes those projects harder to just build in general. And in my view, we have an inventory and a supply problem. There's just not enough housing. And so for housing to be affordable, we just need more of it. And so by designating growth areas and areas that, it's easier for developers to come in and build more housing and increasing supply, it should lessen that burden. But I think the other thing is, we're not isolated as a town. We can look at it as a state. But, if looking at the 150 to 200 units we're looking at, that could be a project in Portland. Portland's going to be able to absorb so much more of this housing supply. But I do think that when we look at homes you can afford, different styles of homes is probably more important and more impactful for our town. And I think, Peter, yours is a great example. ADUs, so you can move out of your 3-bedroom home. Or, if you have an ADU, you could supplement it and rent it out to someone who might rent there year round, and then it would make a full, home easier to afford. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. But I think homes that we can afford, I think, is a supply issue and a zoning issue, and that's a more local thing that we can control. And then the affordable housing with the big A, it's built with subsidies. It has state and federal regulations, and I think...
And yet, all affordable housing isn't built with subsidies. Private and public types of programs that are utilizing things like TIF, that are utilizing things like looking at what will this investment save us down the road? And certainly I'm not promoting at all. I think I've said this before, that Raymond is going to solve the affordable housing or the housing crisis in Maine or in the nation. And I'm not asking personally for, buildings that have 40 or 50 units, 6 feet from the lake. What I'm asking for is something, whereas we've gone so long with nothing. Ben?
Yeah, so I think what this discussion has triggered for me is we need to maybe on that second slide with the bullet points for each one of these scenarios talk a little more explicitly about housing. We talked a little bit about senior housing, and we talked a little bit about multifamily housing, but I think in any one of these, like in this growth area down on 302 or in the villages approach or the corridors approach, like those are the places where I would expect to see more housing options. Outside of those areas in the light green and dark green is probably going to remain a majority single family homes on lots by themselves, and maybe some of them have ADUs. But those village areas, those growth areas, are the places where you're likely and going to be encouraging some of those other kinds of housing types. Some of them might be subsidized, some of them might not. Some of them could be 2 or 3 unit buildings. Maybe there's room for an apartment building or 2. And I don't think we're going to get a whole lot more fine-grained in the scenarios besides letting people to just paint enough of a picture so that it will give people a sense of, you know, hey, would some other kinds of housing options be appropriate in areas outside of this, like those village nodes we identified on the other map, or along 85, or in this vicinity near the schools and the kind of the civic core of the community. Other people, you know, people are going to have varying opinions, and that's kind of what I'm interested in hearing about. But I think the key takeaway from that last thread of a conversation is to talk more about like the kinds of housing and where those would be encouraged or discouraged under each one of these scenarios.
Speaking about the kind of housing, planning board question for you. And going back to that, would it make sense to make sure that, like, if you're putting a multifamily in that commercial zone that we're talking about, to have some commercial as well? So if you say, like, yeah, you can build a quadplex, but it's got to have some sort of commercial, because if we were trying to build up our commercial zone, if we're taking it up with just housing, it's not really allowing us to.
I don't think
build
that
it.
was in the ordinance.
It's just
But
saying, yeah,
if
just
you could-
saying that it could just
think
be.
we should consider that?
I think I think the town should consider. I'm not sure
It's
how it
not
would
too
look
late.
like.
We have the public hearing coming up, is it the 20th?
20th.
20th.
Yeah,
I'd
I
like to
encourage
attend to that.
everyone to attend.
But that would help some of the stuff that we're talking about with allowing commercial and not just taking it all up with residential. I would say, like, yeah, it's.
Right, well, as it exists today, you can build a commercial building on 302 in the village. An example is where, how do I describe where it is? It's one of Mike Meyer's buildings down on 302. He built a commercial building and had offices. There's a dog wash and there's Maggie's Hair next door.
The red
And
building?
that building has commercial on the first floor, and on the second floor, he's got a couple apartments up there. So you can do that currently. I don't know if you're proposing that we allow, or Greg, maybe you can answer this. Are they proposing that a strictly residential building can be built, or does it have to have a component?
No, it doesn't have to have a
Okay.
commercial.
I would like to see it to have commercial, just to keep the shops. Because that's the whole idea, is to have walkability within the commercial zone, but there's nothing to walk to. It almost defeats the purpose
I
of.
think one of the things that prompted the planning board to look at this was the recent sale of White Pines Motel on Route 302. And the people that purchased that want to eventually develop that into residential condos or apartments, or that's the long-term plan. And right now in that zone, that would not be allowed.
He can't do it because he's in shoreline zone.
Shoreline zone.
Right.
So I'm saying a lot of what's being discussed, and what Kate and Ben have discussed as far as the three scenarios, that the scenario to me that seems to make the most sense personally would be number 2, and it would be obviously taken a little bit from 3.
Yeah, we're not
The
voting for
highway,
scenarios.
and maybe a little bit from 1 as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I love the way that you propose that, and really, ultimately, it's gonna be the community's decision. But it's I think that this committee has served, despite the fact that we're kinda handcuffed, because implementation is quite a ways away from the great ideas that have come from this group.
But that shouldn't take away from our work here.
It shouldn't.
And what I was thinking the whole time that Kate was talking about these 3 plans is that in my mind, I'm thinking of it as we take 3 Mylars or see-through plans. You lay them on top of each other and you end up with one that has a bit from each one. Does that make sense? Because it just simplified it for me. It's like I liked bits and pieces and didn't like certain things and others. But yeah, I think once we hear from the public, that's what we're supposed to be doing, is what the public wants.
Kayla?
Chris, maybe you can answer this. Do we have any areas in Raymond that are more prone to flooding, or that we have concerns in the future that they will be flooded?
Yeah, we have a floodplain ordinance, and it's around Panther Run for one.
So, and I bring this up because I have concerns about developing in our village area where it's so close to Panther Run.
I see that being a flood problem.
Isn't
Well-
the state about to reissue or issue a revised?
Well, they've been
flood
talking
plan?
about that for like 7
Yeah.
years. But yeah,
I just think that's something that we should consider as a committee, and that's part of climate resiliency, is not building where it is going to be flooded or
think I
predicted to be
have-
flooded.
Haha.
well, I think the topography of Raymond makes it very challenging anyway, because we've got mountains with ledge and rock, and then you've got down near the village residential area. The reason that area has been able to grow and be developed at the density it is,
It's actually flat,
gravel,
and it's
and it
flat.
goes up a slope, so it's dry. We have to look at, that's one of the reasons, there you go, look at the Cape. See the interior of the Cape, all that blue? Those are all wetlands, and they're of special significance because they're large. They're in resource protection, some of them.
I mean, I know that we were spared from the significant flooding that the rest of the state experienced, but I saw Crescent Lake at its highest levels that I've ever seen. It
Me
was
too, I live
overflowing
there.
its banks. So that's an issue. It only would make sense that Panther Run is probably going to flood outside of its banks at some point in our near future. I just think that's something that we should be cognizant of. Yes, that's a great area for growth, but I think if we're going to grow there, then we need to also include appropriate infrastructure to handle increased risk of flooding.
Well, that's where the resilience, when appropriate, comes in. Because you're absolutely right. Like on our road, going down to Crescent, right by your house, look at the ditching.
Yeah.
That it dropped off 5 feet off
Yeah.
the side of the road in the last couple storms.
I'd also-
DOT just fixed it today.
I'd be concerned with parts of Egypt Road. Looks like that's
Yep.
going to be flooding. There's a lot of wetlands in that area that seems to be flooding every time. I mean, we're only getting wetter, even in our winters. So, I mean, to have floods like that in winter is really unheard of. And I think that this is our future now.
A way to be initiative that you could do. I don't know if it's anything, but like raising a house, saying that if you're in this certain zone, you have to be not so much on pilings. But
That's what our floodplain management ordinance is all about. You have to be 1 foot above flood elevation. And what Peter's talking about, those zones are gonna change. They really changed on the coast. They went from areas where, I don't know the designation, but they went to high velocity, because when it floods up so much, then you get wave action, and it comes further and further into like Scarborough Marsh and all those subdivisions that go down beside it. But that's happening even in Raymond, where we're high and dry.
Sure. So when 302 gets washed out at Panther Run, then we call the Army Corps of Engineers. They build a bypass that actually eliminates the bottleneck, and traffic gets better.
Yeah,
All we need is to pray to the gods of rain.
I got a feeling it's gonna happen anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other point, is where Raymond Beach is. That's gonna, I mean, that's pretty low lying right there. So those are areas that we're identifying potentially as areas of growth. Yet at the same time, we could be kicking
flooded out.
ourselves in the butt for that, because we're going to invest a lot of money and time there for it just to be flooded out.
Good point.
Well, we are adopting the newest floodplain management ordinance in the town of Raymond. That's on the docket for our next planning board meeting. I haven't even read it. I don't know what different,
Is that
how
state
different
model,
it
Craig?
is. It's mandated by the state.
Yeah.
It'll refer to the new maps,
It's,
Yeah.
FEMA maps.
yeah.
FEMA maps, yeah.
So I don't know if that addresses your concern, Kaylee, or I don't
I mean,
even-
it does. I'm just, when I look at those maps, that's something that I'm thinking through, is like, okay, yeah, those are great places for development, but they're also great places to flood out.
yeah, they're the at risk, highest at risk.
Yeah.
Buyer beware.
Yeah, I would think that's on the I think I wouldn't do it personally. I have a hard and fast rule: never develop in a floodplain. But I'm not everybody. But I think that would be on them. I think we can definitely discourage it, and probably should. But I would say, at least in the past 2 years, flood insurance has gone up. The annual premiums 25% per year.
Yep.
So if you're not buying it all cash, it's kind of built into your development costs, and you're just kind of rolling the dice on it.
I knew that number.
I would just give a shout out to every board and committee in this municipality and say that it's a volunteer group, as we are, And it's a lot of work and time and effort without much in the way of recognition. I can remember back around 2000, the town actually had a dinner for all the volunteers. I was able to attend because I was on
Really?
the ZBA.
How'd I miss that?
I don't believe we've done anything like that since, but that's just a side comment. But overall, I'd shout out to all committees and boards in this municipality that, well, my opinion is we need to adopt more of a proactive than a reactive policy making, so that someone who comes as an example and applies to put a solar field next to a residential or in a residential area, without really thinking through buffers and the like, that was, in my opinion, reactive. I don't envy the board for that, having that be put in that position. But what are they to do? Someone comes up and says, you know, you've got an ordinance that says I can put a solar farm in a residential area or abutting a residential area, and I want to do it. And then residents are up in arms in that area, and they say, no, they want moratoriums, and they want this and that, and everything else. Being more proactive, such as I believe many on this committee, not many, some on this committee feel that, oh no, he's going to go on again about 2003, you know? But as I first read that law, it has almost an impact on everything that we do here. And so being proactive, even though, you know, yeah, we could wait till the lawsuits come in, you know, and then, you know, we can develop ordinances that won't be overturned. But I just think that every board and committee needs to be more proactive, which I think this committee did as far as getting out in front of other committees. We got planning board, we got budget finance, we've got code enforcement. This is a good committee. It's been said more than once, even a lot by the members of the last committee. This is a good committee. Anyway, more from North Star on these scenarios.
I was just going to, I told you I knew the answer to how much vacant buildable land was in Raymond, and it's about 6,000 acres, or almost over 9 square miles. That's currently, the entire parcel is vacant.
And not in conservation.
And not in conservation.
What's that on a percentage?
I thought I remember 40%, roughly 40%
Yeah, I think it's
from.
something like that, yes. I can do the math, but
According to the handout from our last
it is, exactly. I'm trying to
workshop
pull
in land use, 47% of the town is residential, 45% is undeveloped.
yeah, so huge amount of, there is a lot of that land though that's not buildable.
Right.
Because of steep slopes or what have you.
So buildable because it's in a buildable area, but not buildable because of terrain.
Yeah, I think those numbers are gonna like just be very high level. There are site-specific constraints that aren't able to be noted here. And I think that goes to a point I heard a moment ago too about within these growth areas or within the village areas, there are absolutely going to be places, wetlands, floodplains that will not be developed in those areas. And there's probably beyond that going to be places where you want some parks or open space, like otherwise developable land that is reserved for people's use and enjoyment. So I made a few notes here as well that we, you know, when you see a big bubble on a map or a corridor that's all highlighted in orange, that's not a big homogeneous, you know, bunch of 2 and 3 unit buildings. It's meant to kind of designate generally a place where, you know, different kinds of things might happen in the future. And every property is going to have to go through its own, you know, kind of more specific property level site review.
In my understanding, as far as what's buildable and what's not, kind of, if I understand real estate at all, it's that the cheapest land is usually developed first.
Well, yeah, the easy stuff is flat and well drained and on a public road. But I will say the numbers that Kate gave you are for vacant lots. And in Raymond, there's an awful lot of houses on 20, 40 plus acres where you could put a lot more things on that property that's just used for a single family home today. So I think that number
Yeah.
probably understates like an overall build out. Like I think it's worth acknowledging that. I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on that in a future land use meeting, because we're really trying to look at like what the next foreseeable future is. Like we don't want to go through the exercise like what a full build out in 100 years is going to look like. I think we're really going to be well served to focus on, you know, the view, you know, 10 or 15 years out, and what do we need to do in the next 5 years to start making meaningful progress toward that. So to that end, I think that these scenarios, you know, again, shouldn't be, you know, so into outer space or so unrealistic. They need to be things that people could recognize, like, oh, maybe I'm seeing a little of that already, or I could envision the way it used to be happening again, or something like that. Every person's going to look at these things and have a little bit of their own thoughts or memories, or that reminds me of a place that I like in a different town, or that reminds me of something that I really don't want to see here. And I think that those are going to be the conversations that I want you to listen to, and will be doing a lot of listening. I think unlike the last workshop, like we're going to have to lay these out and kind of give people some expectation of how they can, you know, meaningfully participate and kind of compare these scenarios. But after that, I'll answer some questions, but mostly I would be interested in listening, and I want Kate and Sam to listen, and hopefully you guys can just kind of absorb some of these things that as people react to. It's kind of fun to hear people engage with these maps, and, you know, frankly, you know, have strong feelings that are positive and negative, because the other thing about scenarios, as opposed to just presenting a draft future land use map, is this is not set in stone. There's a lot of options, and we can't foresee and predict exactly what's going to happen. So if we can pick the best elements of these things under like a high traffic scenario, or a high rain scenario, or lake level change scenario, we'll be able to come up with appropriate policies and zoning to react to these things, both to encourage things that we want to happen, but also to avoid and minimize the negative impacts. So that's another good use of scenario planning, is, you know, we're kind of coming in with lots of ideas, and some of them stink. So I think that that's what I like to hear.
What's the, again, refresh on the method for capturing that from the folks? It'll be pins and needles, or stickies, or numeric sticky counts, different colors.
Yeah, we'll have, you know, primarily, so I'm envisioning we'll have a big 24 by 36 map of each of these scenarios, and then an accompanying page that has kind of those highlights for housing, land use, transportation that we went through. So people will have stickies, they'll have dots if they find them useful. We also have those smiley face stickers. I can bring those.
Kate's a big
Some of them
fan.
smile and some of them frown, and one is like neutral. So we'll have those kind of things for people to comment on, and then we'll also have the sort of open-ended area where you can get a blank map and do whatever you want on it.
Yeah, there will be folks who, you know, like, you didn't get any of this right, or like, if you just do this one thing, it's going to be fine, and then they can tell us what that is. You know, I think that, you know, we're not I like scenario planning for a number of reasons. It's a lot of work to set up, and it's a lot of work up front, but I think it does give us a chance to kind of go into a meeting with a lot more options, and to give people a chance to kind of compare and contrast and think about, you know, if we keep getting rain like we did this winter, what is it going to mean in this scenario or that scenario? Or if we keep getting short-term rentals the way we have, like, what is that going to mean under each scenario? And it lets you kind of compare these land use patterns under different kind of conditions, and is a more, I think, open-ended way of collecting feedback as opposed to just kind of saying, well, this was the land use map from the last plan, you know, we're gonna massage some edges and move things in and out, and we'll call that the draft for the workshop and let people react to it. I think it's less, it's more dynamic with this scenario option. So as long as we can do a good job explaining it and telling people that it's okay to not like some of these, and we're not going to vote, we're not going to pick a winner. It's about picking the best from each one, and they're willing to engage on those things. I think it could be a really good session.
Ben or Kate, is it, in your experience, unusual after a comp plan is approved by the town that it takes 6 years for the implementation committee to finish up their report to the town on implementation? Does it take that long?
It takes a long time to get through a list of over 100 things, for sure. I think that some towns do a very good job of, you know, they have an implementation committee that is, you know, kind of bird dogging the whole process and keeping boards and committees accountable for their pieces of it. Because it does belong to everybody. It's not just the select board's plan or the implementation committee's plan, but there really should be a group who's reminding their friends and neighbors that, you know, hey, open space folks, or hey, you know, budget folks, this is, you know, your goals to keep in mind as you do your work each year. And I think there's usually a lot of energy in the first few years. You know, once you get to like year 6, you know, you start to lose some of the direct connections with the process, and you lose some of the folks who might have been involved in the planning, aren't as involved in the community, or they've moved on to other
Sure, I just
volunteer
think
things.
in terms of practical application in the time, if some of the ideas that developed by the community when we started this process in 2022 are not addressed for the remaining year and a half, 2 years of the comp plan,
Yeah.
and then you add 6 years on top of that, you're almost ready for a new comp plan.
Yeah, there's some pretty good guidance out there from other states, and even I think the old state planning office used to say, you know, this is a 10-year plan that needs to get looked at every 5 years. You should do like a little check-in and maybe update some numbers, you know, kind of remind the community that this is out there and it's a guide for them to use as you make policy decisions. And if there's things that need to get brushed up, new opportunities will present themselves that you'll want to react to, and maybe have the comp plan to speak to that. So I think, you know, as maybe this is a preview of the next phase we're moving into, you know, goals and actions, is, you know, think about what you can do in the next 3 years, you know, and really focus on that. And then maybe have a little guidance for the, you know, what you can do in 5 years. And anything beyond that is really just kind of long-term goal.
So I would think that one of the ways to achieve that would be to not have 104.
There will be a lot of things on the list, for sure. There's a lot of things that the state needs to require, but I think we've done a lot of work in the last few years, and Kate's done a lot of it, is, you know, thinking about how to package and organize and not, you know, what are the 100 things we need to do in the next 10 years? It's more like, what are the 5 things we need to do in the next 2 years? And you'll make uneven progress over time, but if you can kind of keep those things in the loop, there's conferences we've been to that are like, if you're not going to deal with it in this budget or the next budget, it's a long-term goal.
Sure.
You know, like, focus on what you can do in the next couple years and have the plan be that longer-term guidance as you go forward. And,
We had that
keep checking in
conversation.
with it.
We had that conversation in budget finance.
Yeah.
And it was basically, you know, I mean, 2 different perspectives. I'm talking a perspective of someone who's looking 10 years down the road, and you guys are looking the day-to-day, month-to-month, end of the fiscal year. So it's 2 different concepts as far as planning is concerned.
Yeah, and in the best case scenario, you'll have some of the goals and policies will be the bridge between that 10 to 15-year vision and the year-to-year kind of budget and policy decisions.
Oh, good.
Other questions about the upcoming workshop? From getting the word out, please do your best to get that word out. I actually had a conversation today with Sheila Bork as far as Raymond's aging population, and she reached out to me, and I communicated back that please get the word out about the 19th to everybody who you influence as far as issues involving aging in the town. And with that, I think agenda is just public comment. I have none.
I have one comment, Peter.
Yes.
You asked me at the last meeting to see if I could find a copy of the old growth management ordinance.
Yes.
So I have a copy here, and the reason you asked me that is to define what the growth area was.
Yes.
And I'll just read what the definition in the growth management ordinance from 2006. This is growth area. Those areas of town contained within the village residential district, VR, the commercial district, C, and the industrial district, I, as depicted on the town of Raymond zoning map. So that's what we had discussed. This just
I appreciate that.
affirms what we talked about.
I appreciate that.
And this is not in our ordinance to date. It was removed, but that's it.
Yep. And once again, my concern and my understanding is that there is descriptions that I found that Kate had found, basically noting those as the growth areas in a plan. So I think we meet the state requirements already as far as mentioning the growth areas in a comprehensive plan. And the only issue that I had was the fact that the map was a zoning map. And that may have been acceptable then, but as I understand it, Kate, it's not acceptable now. So your designated growth areas are not according to your zoning.
That's not, yeah, so the way that we're approaching this is that we want this map to inform your future zoning, so we don't want to base it on your current zoning.
But will the state, would they accept it if, I've got a copy of the zoning map, that's the current one that was actually corrected, I believe, recently by our contract planners, because they had not described in this the commercial district accurately, and now it is. But I guess I would say, using this map, if we were to submit it to the state and just writing on it, these are growth areas, would they accept that?
They may. I know that some communities have taken that approach. I think oftentimes this land use discussion in particular takes place in the context of, either things are really out of whack with zoning and what we're seeing for development and land use and where it's happening, or there's a sense in the community that it needs to get adjusted. Where the zoning map says growth should happen is not necessarily where people want it to happen, or vice versa. There could be places that are zoned for very low density kind of activities that might be, in other people's opinion, a very natural place for the next, project.
Yeah.
So I think that given the amount of change we've seen in Raymond, population growth, and the things that we've learned through the inventory chapter work, we were very explicit in our approach to this of not using the existing zoning map and just kind of looking at the existing land use map, and not worrying too much about uses and setbacks and lot sizes, and just thinking about more of like land use patterns and past and more recent, and kind of putting those things together.
And I would think that that'd be something to really bring home at this workshop. to the citizens. Because I believe that the first thing that a lot of them are gonna, their take is gonna be is, oh, you're rezoning the town. And that's not really the intent, to rezone the town.
Yeah, the future land use map is not a zoning map.
Yep. Thank you.
You looking for comments, questions, whatever? I have two things. I'll try not to be too long. One is the contract planner. You mentioned you heard him talk about certain things. He
Yes.
also said that, and Chris, you can help me with this. In order to fill a wetland, formerly you could go through DEP and get a permit from them. But more recently, the Army Corps of Engineers has taken over, and they require them to do the work, and
And there's an impact fee.
there's a fee to that. It's for Cumberland County, it's more than $6 per square foot after 5,000 square feet, I think. And Jim Seymour also said it wouldn't be unusual that someone would have to pay up to $30,000 for a permit from Army Corps of Engineers. So who's making unaffordable housing is the question. And the other thing is, we talked a lot about open space and open land available for all kinds of uses, but we really didn't talk about the property owners, the private owners like myself and Frank was, and Peter, and the other guy down there, John. Something to think about is, why do they keep their land, and why would anybody want to sell their land? And I've worked with landowners my whole career, and I'm talking mostly about forest landowners. And I think I have a good sense about that, but we ought to be thinking about what it is that people that own forest land, what is it that keeps them interested in keeping it as opposed to selling it to developers? Just for asking for people to think about that, that's all.
Good point. Good point, Craig. And I guess I said I wouldn't talk, but I'll just add this, that my understanding is that when you're talking developer talk to developers, one of the first things they look at in any community is the attitude of that community towards development. So how we craft our zoning requirements and where our future plans are, because anybody who's going to be investing big bucks in development, believe me, these are individuals that know finance, they know communities, they know business, and they're not looking for a community that's going to give them a hard time. So if in crafting ordinances is also, I believe, crucial as far as how this town or any town develops over time. And so if you are absolutely developer resistant, that word gets out, and guess what? You don't have development. You don't have any private public partnerships. And I guess the last thing I'd say is that yesterday Cumberland voted down their affordable housing. They voted it down.
They couldn't afford it.
Well, it was also, I think it was an issue of that was land that was deeded to the town for a specific use by a family. And, if you don't have the family's endorsement of that, even if you've moved deeds around over time, that leaves a bad taste too. So it was dedicated for a park, not for affordable housing.
Right.
All right, if there's nothing further,
To adjourn.
I would take a motion to adjourn.
Second that motion.
Talk too much today. Okay, we have a motion second. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.